Now, in the last session, we were trying to see on what is continuous integration, and extending that, we also saw what is continuous delivery, correct? Now, on the remaining things, now let us see a couple of other topics that we need to understand from the Jenkins. So the first thing that we have to understand is Jenkins is not just used by one user, but it will be used by many users. So that is when in Jenkins specifically, we have to give the authentication on who should be able to work on this and who should not be able to work. So the first thing is you should be giving them the access permission so that they can connect to the Jenkins and work. And second thing is we should be able to tell on who should be working on it and who should not be working. For example, if a developer wants to use Jenkins, the job whatever that we have created, he should be requiring it only to see, whereas he should not be able to modify anything that we have already configured. So that way, how do you ensure what kind of permissions that we can give to a particular person is what we need to know. The same way, when you take as a company, there will be many tools like this. So we cannot keep creating different user accounts and maintain it. So in that way, let's try to understand now, how do you try to give the security in terms of who should be able to work on Jenkins and how is that and what is the permissions that they should be having. Okay, so that is the default thing that we will try to see. So to understand this, if you go to your Jenkins localhost, now in the manage Jenkins, you will have particularly something called as global security. Okay, so this is the one using which we will tell who should be able to work on Jenkins and what is the permissions that he or she should be having. So that is what we are going to set it up here. So the first one, what you have to do is, now you have to make sure that you are enabling the security. And under the security, you have two things. First is security realm and authorization, where the first one will help us to ensure who should be able to access the Jenkins in terms of the username and password. And the second one is authorization. So after the person is coming to the Jenkins, what and all permissions does he have? So that will be decided by this particular option. Now, the first one is, how do we give a user account or an access to a Jenkins? So that way, by default, now Jenkins has its own database. So if you enable this, what will happen is when you try to save this and you come back, Jenkins will ask us to sign up first. So in case if you are a new user, we can use the Jenkins page to create a username and store the password directly. Like this, every username that we want to create, we can create and store it inside the own database of Jenkins. Now, the problem with this is it is something for our testing purpose. We can always use this own database. But when you go as a company, what will happen is we will be actually having many applications like this. And when we have different application, we cannot keep creating an account for a user on all these things. So that is how the other way of giving a access to a particular user is what we call it as a single sign-on. So we have a concept called SSO or single sign-on. So what do you mean by single sign-on? If you go to a company, they will be basically giving you a user ID where they would have created an account. Now, using that username and password, you can connect to all the machines that you have in your company. And the same time, you can also connect to all the applications that you have. So that is how, using a single account, you will be able to connect to different machines and applications that is available in your company. So that way, what we have to do is we have to attach that particular mechanism how we are doing to our Jenkins, so that when we try to log into Jenkins, we will be using the same common account and we will be trying to log in. Okay, so that is what we call it as SSO. single sign-on, which means using a single username and password, you will be able to connect to all the applications and the machines. If not, it will not be easy for us to maintain separate account on separate machine or application. So how exactly it is done? So there is a tool or a utility called as LDAP. Okay, now let's assume that first we have some machines or an application. Okay, now let's say this is one machine and we have another machine. Okay, now if you say each one of them are different, and by default, if you want to connect to each one of them, what is that we have to do? We have to create a separate username and password. Same way here, a separate username and password, and the same thing here. So instead of creating a separate account on each of the system, now if you use this tool or utility called as LDAP, what it will be doing is there will be one common utility where whatever the username and password that we want to create, we can create it here. So for every user, we will create an account and attach it to this. We will be having a password. Okay. So now like this, for each user that you want to create an account, you create in the LDAP and in such a way that now this LDAP acts as the intermediator between us and the server or the application, so that now instead of we directly logging into the machine, if the server or the system is connected to the LDAP, when we connect to the machine, it will be routed to the LDAP, so that as a user when we log in, we will always go to the LDAP, and now whatever the username that we are giving, it will be verified against the username and password is available to the LDAP tool or the software, so that if your username and password is available in this, then the LDAP will redirect us to the particular application wherever that we are interested to work. So like this, now we can have one single username and password that is created in this LDAP server, and each of our system will be related or integrated to the LDAP. So that is how when we try to log in, we will first try to log in into the LDAP, and if our username and password is available in the LDAP, it will allow us to then go to the particular system wherein we can log in and access. So that is how, rather than creating separate accounts, we will be creating one single account for a user inside the LDAP. In fact, this is what you will be using even to log your computer. So when you try to connect to your computer, now it will be verifying against the system, and in that, if you have LDAP enabled, then that is how not even connecting to your laptop, but it is the same username and password you will be connecting to all the machines and applications in your organization's network. Okay, so this mechanism is what we call it as single sign-on. Now, the LDAP server is actually a huge server, and it will be maintained by the system administrators or the IT team. So every company has an IT team, right? So they will be taking care of the LDAP. So now what we have to do is, if we have a server like Jenkins, now let's say that I'm bringing in a new server called Jenkins. So what we should be doing is, now when we create Jenkins, and if we want Jenkins to be attached to the LDAP, then whenever now a user tries to come and log in, it will be first connecting to the LDAP, and it will be verifying the username and password, and then it will be allow them to connect. So that is how, if a user is part of the company, then he can directly access this particular Jenkins. If not, he'll not be able to access. So that is how we don't have to create a separate user account for all the users. By default, if the user account is available in the LDAP, it will be able, or he will be able to connect to the Jenkins which is available in the machine. So that is the other way of creating the accounts. So for this, what we have to do is, we have to tell our Jenkins what is the LDAP server we have to use, and if you configure, then after you save and apply the Jenkins, going forward, you should be using the username and password that has been given to you as part of the single sign-on, so that automatically you will be able to connect. So if a person is not in the network, or if his username and password is not there in the LDAP, then he'll not be able to connect. So that is how we make sure that he will be able to connect by default. So to do it, if you click on the LDAP, it will be asking you certain details. Now we have to go, or we have to work with the specific IT people and give all the details that we have. Specifically, we will give where is the server available. So it will be something like this, where we will say LDAP and then the name of the LDAP server on which it is running. For example, if I say ldap.company.com, and in that, what is the port that you want to run. So all these details will be given by the IT people, where we have to take, and with respect to each value that is needed, or with respect to the LDAP server, whatever values that is possible, we should ask them and give all the details here. Okay, so once you give, and then when you apply, it will be asking you to enter a username and password to log in, wherein the username and password that you will be providing will be verified against the LDAP server. So that is how, using the same username and password which you have used to connect to your laptop, you can use the same thing to connect to the Jenkins also. Okay, so remember, we will not be having a separate database, but we will be configuring our Jenkins with respect to the LDAP server. So for this, we need to get the details from the IT team on what exactly is the server, what is the search base. There will be a string which they will give you, and along with that, what is the password that you have to use to connect. And if you put it, Jenkins will be trying to connect to the LDAP, and every time a user logs in, it will be verified against the LDAP server. And if the user is available, then it will allow him to come to the specific Jenkins homepage. And that is how we will be tracking on who is logged into the Jenkins. Getting it? So remember, you will use LDAP to authenticate who should be allowed to work on Jenkins. Okay, that way we will be using a concept called single sign-on, where using the same username and password, you will be able to connect to Jenkins and also other machines. Now, this is only the first part, where we are trying to give on the access. Okay, but when a person logs into Jenkins, what happens is, you can see here, by default, everyone has all the permission. So that is how, when we try to go to Jenkins as a normal user, you will be able to see everything. But we can choose option to tell who should be able to work and who should not be able to work. So that is how you have to remove this option, because if you say anyone can do anything, by default, if you attach your Jenkins to LDAP, now any user within the organization can connect to Jenkins and he can do any task he wants. So that is how we have to give specifically the authorization or permission for each user. So now if you remove this, what will happen? You will be able to connect to the Jenkins, but you will not be having all the default permissions. That means you will be able to only see everything, but not modify or delete or run anything. Okay, so that way, now in order to specify who should be able to work and what permissions that he needs, we will be using this option called metrics based security as the best practice. If you click this, it will be asking us what are the permissions that you have to give. So here, if you see, all the types of permissions will be available, where if you want to specifically work on the node, agent means it is for the node. So do you want to have permissions to create a new node, or do you want a permission to modify existing node, or do you want permission to delete a node? So like that, if you want to work on a specific node, then based on what permission you have to give to a user, you can choose this. Same way for a job, do you want to permission to just see the job, or do you want permission to modify a job or create a job or delete a job, or do you want to have permission to run the job? All those kind of different permissions specific to a job can be given. Okay. Same way, if you want to work on different tools where you want to see this or you want to just run, you can use different options. Now, if you want to add a user, then first thing what you have to do is you have to give the username of that particular user, whatever that you have, and then click add. Wherein now you can see for this particular user, it is showing us what are the permissions that you want to give. So based on this, that user will be having the additional option, wherein by default now he will be able to only see everything. But specifically, if you want to allow him to run the job or modify the job, then you can say configure and create, so that now if this user is going to log in, he will be having permissions only to configure all the jobs or delete any job based on what option that you want to give. Suppose if I want to give him permission to create new node, then I will come here and click on this configure. So like this, for this person, whatever specific option that you want, you can give. If not, by default, that person will be able to only see everything. Okay. Now, if you want to use this as a administration account, then you can just come to the end and you can click on this, where it will give all the permissions. So that is how you will become a administrator on this Jenkins, because you have all the permissions of creating a job, deleting a job, modifying a job, adding a new node, deleting a node, and configuring. All those things we will be doing it one by one. Okay. So depending on this, we will be trying to give different user IDs, and for each user ID you will be trying to add. So now remember, we will not be adding all the users, because by default when a user comes to this Jenkins, now they will be having only the default permission to see. So only when a particular user comes up and says that, hey, I am trying to work on this project, but I want to modify this job, can you please help me, because I am the person who I'm going to maintain. So that way you will add only his username and he will give whatever permissions that you want to allow him to work on. So like that, for each user you will first add and select whatever permissions that you want to give. Same way, suppose if we are working, let's say I'm joining a team where they have already maintained Jenkins, and in that team if I want to take care on Jenkins, then I should ask someone to add our username and give all the permissions. So only then we will be able to do all the activity. So based on what options you are choosing, we will be able to work only on that. So that is how when a user, that is developer or a QA, comes up and says that, hey, can you please help me to create this job, and these are the tasks it will do, and then give me permission to run whenever I want. So that is how we will create and give him only permission to run or see that. So like this, using this authorization on a metrics based security, you will say what is the user, and for that user what and all permissions that you want to give. Getting it? So that's the two things that we have to do in terms of security. So based on this only, whatever user as whom we will be logging in, we'll be having permissions to work on different tasks. So for us, when we want to work as an administrator, we have to make sure our name is added and we have all the permission to it, so that we will be able to do all the activity. Getting it? On what is security? Hello? Okay. Okay, so remember, only with this permission and giving with LDAP, you will be able to work on the production machine. Now, I'm not going to save because as soon as I save, then it'll ask me for the permission. So as of now, for the default, we can go ahead without saving. So by mistake, let's say you have set up all those things and you forgot to add your username, then just primarily go ahead, uninstall and then reinstall. You don't have to worry much. So now, ideally, when we are creating some job, okay, what will happen? Everything will be available on our Jenkins homepage. So if I'm just going to create some sample jobs, everything will be available here. Now, like this, when different users try to create different kinds of jobs, then what will happen? Everything will be available on the Jenkins homepage. Vinay, I didn't get what do you mean by the options? Which one are you talking? Okay. Now, in some companies, what you can do is you want to give certain default permissions that is available on a user account. So you can use this to give that kind of permission because by default, everyone will be having all the permission. So first, you can make sure based on your company, is there any specific kind of mode that you have set up where each user or a group as whom you are going to work will have a specific permission to it. So this will be taken over from your Linux machine if you have installed. So that is when we call it as legacy. Legacy means which is already existing on your system and it is being taken over. So if you want to work on those kind of things, you will be using it. Pretty much these kind of things were used longer when Jenkins came up. But now, since we are focusing on having much more simpler things, we do not want to have everything as the same one. So specifically, we want to authenticate properly. So that is why we are going to use metrics based as one of the popular one. Okay, but all the other things are pretty much the older ones. Legacy means whatever that system you already have, and in that is there any particular authorizations that you have already existing, and if you want to just take over from it, you can use the legacy, so that as whatever user that you are logging in, the same account or whatever permissions that you are having, that will be getting transferred. Whereas now we don't want to happen in that way, nor by default we want everyone to have every option. So specifically I should be saying for this user, this is the only permission. If I don't give anything, then that user will have only the permission to see everything and not to do anything more. So that kind of permissions is what we are going to set using metrics based security. Okay. So coming back here, now what did I say is, as we see now, Jenkins can be used by many different users. And the same way, we will be having jobs which is being created by many people, and for many project related jobs, everything will be available on this. Now, if needed, we can customize the job in such a way that we can see only the jobs out of our interest. Now assume that if I have 100 jobs in this home page, it will not be easy for me to just choose what is the job of my interest and monitor only that. So that way, what we can do is you can actually segregate or group certain number of jobs that is needed for me, and I can see only that. So that kind of segregation is what we call it as view. VIEW. View means you are going to view only a selected set of jobs of your interest. Okay. And by default, whatever that you're seeing here is also a type of view called all. All means you are going to see all the jobs available in the Jenkins. Now, instead of that, you can create your own view and say what are the jobs that you want to see. So every time, instead of coming to this default view, you can go to that view of yours, and in that you will be seeing only the jobs which you have selected, so that you will be looking and monitoring only on them. So how do I create a new view? If you click on this plus, it will be giving you an option to create a view. So here I can say whatever the name of the view and choose this list. And if you say OK, it will be asking you the options on what are the kinds of jobs you want to see, and in that what jobs you want to see. So the first thing is, do you want to see only the jobs which is enabled and it is running, or there is an option where you can actually disable a job so that Jenkins will not be running. So do you want to display only that? So based on your requirement, Jenkins will be showing it. Suppose if I want both of them, I can say select all the jobs, and then what are the name of the jobs that you want to select. So it will be giving you the list of all the hundreds of jobs that you have in your Jenkins, out of which you have to select what are the jobs that you want to see it inside this view called Adam. Okay, suppose if I choose a job, only that job will be available in the view. Sometimes what will happen is you will be having more number of jobs and you want to choose it. So if you don't remember the naming convention, then you can use a pattern where you can tell to Jenkins search for all the jobs related to this pattern. So simply now if I say something like test job star, then Jenkins will be considering all the job names which start with test job. Okay, so like that you can match a set of jobs matching this particular pattern. If not, you can manually choose what jobs do you want from the list of jobs available. Okay, so after you have told what are the jobs that you want to see in this view, then you have to tell what is the column or the data about that job that you want to see. So by default, you will be having columns like status and then weather, name, when was the last time that it was successful, when was it failed, and how much time did it took for running the last execution. And if you want to do a build directly from that view, you can choose this option. Okay, so if you just apply now, you can see that on our Jenkins, this is the default view where it is going to show everything. But if you choose our view, whatever we have created, it will be showing only that number of jobs which we are interested to see and not all the other things. And in that, whatever column that you have given, you can see that it is trying to display. And if you want to do the build of this job directly, rather than going inside, if you just click on this, it will be doing the build directly from this. So like this, you can create a view and you can list only those jobs out of your interest and you can see only them. Okay, so you can create as many views as you want, where each view can be specific to a project or a task you want to do. So if you want to see only those jobs related to that project or task, then go to the view and it will be showing only the jobs associated to it. And also, if you look at the URL, it is also changing, right? Because by default, when we say 8080, it always goes to the view called all. That is why we will be able to see everything. Suppose instead, if you want to go to this view, you can give this pass also. So that is how you don't have to look at all the other jobs that is running in the Jenkins, and you will be seeing only your jobs based on your interest that you have choose to see from the view. Okay, so basically it will be useful, and in your production you will be seeing many views like this where you can group all the particular project related jobs or some maintenance related jobs together, and you will be able to see them from that respective view. Getting it? Did you guys get what is a view and what is the purpose? and how you can create your own view where you can see only those set of jobs that you want to see in it. Others? So like this, when you go to Jenkins, you will just group and see only that view where it will be showing all the jobs which you have configured out of your interest, and you will not be worrying about looking at all the other ones. Okay. So now this is pretty much from the Jenkins what we have to work on by creating. But in Jenkins, we will also have some kind of other work, that is the maintenance part. So one kind of work what we have so far is creating a new node or configuring and trying to install a plugin, and based on that you will be creating different kind of jobs and configuring it. That will be one task. In the same way, we have to do certain maintenance of the Jenkins itself. So what kind of maintenance that we want to do in Jenkins? So if you come, many time you might have to start and restart Jenkins. So if you want to do that way, now you can actually install a plugin that is available in Jenkins to install and reinstall. Karnakar, can you hear me? I'm not sure. Can you hear me? Okay, I think here's some problem. So now, if you want to restart Jenkins, one of the easiest way that you can do is you can use the web page itself, where on the web page wherever you have connected to the Jenkins, right? If you simply say in the URL, when you have a URL, on the URL, if you say the name of the machine on which Jenkins is installed, :8080 / Jenkins, and if you say exit, it will then try to shut down the Jenkins automatically. Okay. The same way, if you say Jenkins / restart, then Jenkins will try to restart. In case if you have any plugins that you have, you can get it attached to this. If not, Jenkins also has one of the restart plugin where you can use it to stop and start Jenkins. If not, you can go to the services, and in this service you can stop and start. Okay, so you can choose any one of them to do, but the easiest way and the best practice that we always do is, from no matter whether the Jenkins is running on Windows or on Unix, you can just restart it. So if it is on Windows, if you just say restart, Jenkins will be restarting. Now instead of this, since we are going to use the web page to connect to Jenkins, in this you simply say Jenkins / restart or exit, and then Jenkins will be restarted after it, or it will be shut down. Now this is one activity that you will be doing for restarting Jenkins whenever you have some maintenance work like installing a plugin. Now, along with it, we also have to take a backup of the Jenkins, because if Jenkins suddenly not working, or if the machine is not working, then simply if you can copy the contents of the Jenkins home directory to other location, Jenkins will be running. So that way, wherever you have installed Jenkins is called as Jenkins home directory. So what is Jenkins home directory? The location where we have installed Jenkins. Okay, so where is that we have installed Jenkins? We have installed on the Windows C program files Jenkins, right? This is the folder where we have installed, and this is where this is called as Jenkins home directory. So now whatever that we are trying to do on this web page is practically stored under this. Yes, when you're trying to do a restart, once again, you should have the privilege, because only if you have the privilege wherein you have added as an administrator and you have given all the permissions, only then it will be working. If not, you will not be able to restart. Getting it, Hari? So you need to have a administration privilege added. So in the metrics based, if you have chosen everything, one among them is to restart or stop Jenkins. Now, coming back, when you say Jenkins is installed, it will be in a directory, and this directory is called as Jenkins home directory, and whatever that you are going to do on this Jenkins web page will be internally stored here. So if you look, there will be a plugin folder inside which you will be having all the plugins that we have installed in Jenkins. So it is going to download into this directory and it will be using it from this. And all the nodes that whatever that we are going to configure, if you have specified, that will be available under this folder called nodes. So as of now, I don't have anything, but quickly if I create a node, let's say manage Jenkins and manage node. Now just let me just create something, a dummy name. Okay, test node. And now if you see under this node folder, you can see there is a new machine folder by the same name as what we have created, and this is where it is going to store everything. Okay, like this, you're going to have a folder for node, you will have a folder for plugins where it is going to store, and then you will also have a folder called jobs. So for all the job that you have created here, it is going to create a folder called jobs, and inside that it is going to maintain the history of what you have run it and what is the output of that. Everything will be stored here. Now let's take an example. Let's say if I have this job, and in this job I'll just give a build environment and the build step. Let's say Windows batch command, and I'll simply say echo test, nothing else. So if you keep running it now, you'll be having the build output as a history here, right? So like that, whatever that you're going to run, all the details will be stored inside the jobs folder. So if you now see here, under your jobs folder, there are two jobs available. In that, if you want to see specifically on this job called test job, if you go inside the folder, it will have all the details where under the builds further, it will give you the track history of each build. And inside that, if you go, it will be having all the details about what is the console output and what exactly is the output that you have got from the screen here. Okay, the same thing, it will be available inside your log. So that is how for each job that is running, it will be creating a folder with respect to the name of the job, and under that it will be storing all the information about the job. So that is how when you see you are able to get all these things, it is because it is trying to store all the data inside your Jenkins home directory and under that jobs folder. Okay, so as you keep maintaining, this is where everything will be stored. Now, along with the jobs, you will also have logs which will give the details about how every Jenkins node is connected to the master, and if he has any problem, that will be put specifically in terms of each node. Okay, so you can easily go ahead and monitor now what and all are the folders available in this, and is that exactly the same value what it is trying to store. Okay, and in that, now majority of the time whatever the value that you are going to store, Jenkins will be using a file called config.xml. Using that only all the values that you have modified will be present. So in fact, if you go to the node, for each node you will be having a config.xml, and this is the one which will be storing all the values about this particular node. Same way, if you come out, if you go inside the jobs folder, even in this it will be having a configs.xml. That is what we will be seeing it in the configure. So here when you say configure, internally it will be modifying this config.xml only. So that is how wherever you see that you can configure something in Jenkins corresponding to the folder name, it will be creating a config.xml and it will be storing everything. And this way, on the parent Jenkins home itself, you will be having a config.xml, and using this, we can specify what exactly the Jenkins should look. That is, when you come here, this is the default home page, right? So for this, we have the config.xml. So for every changes that you're doing on the Jenkins web page, internally it is going to modify the corresponding config.xml and store everything here. Okay, getting it? So this is what now when you say that you have to take a backup of Jenkins, all you have to do is copy the entire home directory of Jenkins, and if you put into some other location and from there if you start the Jenkins, you will be getting the machine or the Jenkins running on a different location rather than the older location if it has some problem. So that is how, if you want to take a backup of your Jenkins, then pretty much copy the entire home directory where you can easily put it into a new machine and bring back Jenkins from there in case if you have a problem. Or we can also use a plugin called as backup plugin, where in that if you tell what is the Jenkins home directory, it will automatically try to take a copy of the complete home directory and put into a different location what you have specified. Okay, so this is something that we need to know. Now, when you come to a point where what is the best practice on which we will be maintaining Jenkins? So the first thing what you need to make sure is you have the security in Jenkins, which means if you go to global security, you need to make sure that Jenkins is secured. So that is how we will be able to allow who is going to work on Jenkins, and in that what permissions that we have. So make sure that don't leave the Jenkins directly, but always secure it. Yeah, when you say install, the same thing what you have to do, because now assume that I have my laptop and you have your laptop. So when you install Jenkins, both of us will be getting a home directory of Jenkins in which it is going to put all the files. So now if I copy all the contents of my home directory in Jenkins, and if I copy paste into your directory, and then if you restart Jenkins, you can see all the details about all the jobs, all the notes, everything will be coming up in your Jenkins homepage. Okay, so that is how the backup is all about taking the contents of your entire Jenkins directory or the Jenkins home directory. No, there is nothing related to the version. It is more about what are the plugins that you have and what is the specific jobs that you have configured. Yeah, sometime there might be some issues that we need to look at it, but Jenkins as a such, it is all about having different kind of folders and what content you have and how you have maintained. So make sure you have the same version of Jenkins across another place or a latest version. But majorly, if you're just copying the content from one machine to other machine in terms of Jenkins home directory, everything will be coming up. In case if there is any change in the Jenkins plugin, you need to make sure that we are trying to upgrade the plugin to the same version. Okay. Then, now, as I said, make sure every Jenkins is secured. Second thing is, if you remember the default behavior of Jenkins, what is that? So if you do not specify a node to Jenkins, it will always run on the master itself, correct? But now, if you are using it for production, and if you have hundreds of job running, and your nodes itself will be like 20-30 nodes, so that it has to do different tasks. So that way, now, it is not a good practice to allow many jobs running on the master, because what will happen, Jenkins will already be overloaded. In that, if you try to run all the jobs or many jobs directly on the Jenkins, then pretty much it will be overloaded and the Jenkins will not perform properly. It will be very slow. So that is how one of the best practice that we have to make sure is not to run the jobs directly on master. So it should be only on a critical condition as a backup. If not, try to create a new machine or a separate node and configure so that Jenkins will always connect to a particular group of machine and run your job. Okay, so remember this. Then, as I said, try to take up a backup of your Jenkins home directory as much as possible so that even in some case if there is a problem or you delete a job itself completely, you can go back to the backup directory and just copy paste that directory inside the Jenkins home directory and restart Jenkins. You will be getting that job again in the Jenkins, because what you're seeing here is all about taking the content or reading the content from your Jenkins home directory and showing it based on that. Okay, so that's how backup means. You take the complete Jenkins home itself as a backup over a period of time. So maybe once in a week or twice a week, you try to take a complete backup and store it somewhere. And if needed, we can use Jenkins to connect to all the different kind of tools that we want. So don't just use Jenkins only for continuous integration. Think about using Jenkins to connect to various tools so that from Jenkins, you will be able to know how you are connecting to different tools and you can reduce the maintenance activity rather than seeing the tool directly. Okay. Then when I say that, whatever that you are going to store on Jenkins, it will be directly stored on the directory where Jenkins has been installed. Then we need to make sure that the Jenkins is set up on the partition or on your hard disk which has more space. So first thing that you need to do is, if you're installing Jenkins, you have to find out the place where you have huge space, because as you keep adding more and more jobs, more and more configuration, everything will be stored under this particular directory. So wherever this directory is available, that location should have huge space so that suddenly if you want to extend it, you should be able to do. Now over a period of 10 days, let's say 100 users started working and you have created 100 more jobs for each one of them. Suddenly the load on the Jenkins will be higher and the number of jobs will be more, number of nodes will be more, and for each job you will be having many outputs that you have, right? How many times you are running, you will be storing everything. So where exactly it is going to store? Everything will be available under this directory. So that is how we need to make sure that you have enough space on the disk where you have installed Jenkins. Okay, then since every job that you're going to run will be kept as a backup in Jenkins, it is always a best practice to delete or archive all the unused jobs. So first thing is, you will make sure that every job that you have, you maintain only a specific amount of history. And how do you do it? We will delete all the unused output, or we will try to keep only the latest history maintained, and we will try to discard all the older output of the job. In the same way, if you have a job which is not being used for a longer time, unnecessarily, every time Jenkins is running, it will try to read the entire directory that is available here, and based on that, whatever information you have, it will be trying to show here. So if you're not using a job, then just take an archive of it and store it somewhere else so that Jenkins will not be loaded on that job. Okay, so that is how. Make sure if you are not using a job, you directly archive it and delete it so that later on when you can come, you can just copy paste the directory, and if you restart Jenkins, it will be considering that there is a job available. And when you're using Jenkins to run many jobs, make sure you're not giving the scheduled time for all the jobs at the same time, because at the same point of time, if you say 10 jobs need to run exactly at one point of time, then Jenkins has to handle all the jobs at the same time. So that is how there might be some performance issue. So once again, try to give different times for different job so that Jenkins can easily handle everything one by one. Getting it? Others? Did you get that? Okay. So in that, now let's try to see what are some of the most common plugins that we will be using. So along with the standard plugins that Jenkins is going to give, now for continuous integration and continuous delivery, we try to see some plugins like Chakako, SonarQube, Artifactory, right? Like this, for more process oriented, we will have lot of popular plugins which we will be using on a day-to-day basis. So some of them that you will be using is Parametrized Plugin. Now, if you go to your manage plugins and search for this, you will be having a plugin called as parameterized plugin. Now, what is the purpose of this? So this plugin is mainly used when you are having a downstream project. That is, if you are calling another job after completing a job, if you want to pass some values from your parent job to the child job, then you can make use of this plugin. An example is, if you remember when I was setting up the Jenkins, I was showing you that you can pass a parameter like asking the username and then store it. But that was only for that job. What if the dependency job that you have should also be taking some value? So that way, if you install this plugin, then while you try to configure the job, let's say you have this job, in the post build action, if you click this now, along with this, right now what we have it's only build other projects. But if you install that parameterized plugin, here you will additionally get one more option which will say build other projects with parameter. So that if you click, it will give you additional option along with the job, what parameters that you want to pass to it. So that is how whatever that you are taking from your parent, you can pass it on to the child by giving the environment variable here also. Okay, so that is how from the parent you can take a value and you can pass it to the child using the parameterized plugin. Then pre-SEM build step plugin. As the name says, pre-SEM, which means now if you look as part of the continuous integration or whenever you want to connect to a SEM tool, the first thing that it does is directly whenever you want to run the job, it will immediately come and go to this particular section, and whatever the tool you have given, it will be connecting. Sometimes if you want to do some activity before connecting to it, okay, depending on the project, then you can install this plugin. If you install this plugin, you will be getting an additional option here where before connecting to a particular SEM tool, if you want to do any task, you can do it. So you will be getting exactly a step like build step, exactly like this. You will be getting a pre-SEM step where if you choose and give before connecting to a repository or a SEM tool, it will run whatever task you have given in this. So that is when, based on the necessity, if you want to run anything before connecting to a SEM tool, you can make use of this pre-SEM build step plugin. Okay. So again, all these things are process oriented. So think about how you can customize Jenkins to do something more other than the default one. Then job configuration history plugin. what do you mean by job configuration history? So in Jenkins, what do you do if you want to do a job configuration? This is what is a job configuration, right? So you'll come here on a specific job. If you click on configure, you will come to this job configuration page where you can modify something and save. But when you are working on a production machine, we need to keep a track or a history of what and all configuration changes has been done, because we will not be knowing if someone else by mistake modifies something. Let's say within the team, one of your colleague is also trying to modify something on the job, and by mistake he just did some change, and without knowing he saved everything. So if a job is keep failing on, we will not be knowing what changes happened. So that way, we should be having a history on what and all changes happened to the job and who did it. That is, as which user you have logged in, you should be knowing it. So that details can happen using this job configuration history. So if you install this job configuration history plugin, when you come to a job, in addition, you will be getting two boxes here, which will show you what is the current content you have, and before that, what was the content it had, who modified it latest. So that is how every time if someone tries to click the configure button and modify something, it will be tracking and it will be showing you completely. Okay, so that way you can use this job configuration history to basically keep a track of who and all is modifying a job and what exactly has been modified, so that if you need, you can practically go back to any old configuration and get the content back from it. Okay, so that's the use of having a configuration history that is specific to the job. Okay, then the next plugin, build fail analyzer. Now when you say build fail analyzer, why do you need this build fail analyzer? Here, when you're running a job, you will be getting some output. Now in our case, we are just having some simple output, but think about running some production build, which will take like 10, 15 minutes or half an hour, and you will be having many output like this. And if there is something which is getting wrong, the job will just clearly say in the red color that something happened, but it will not be easy for us to see the output. So what we can do is, if you install this build failure analyzer in the job configuration, in the build environment, you will be getting an option called as build analyzer, where if you can give a string or a pattern, let's say that I will say search for a word or a string called as error. So whenever if you run a job, and in that job, whatever output that you are getting, if it is going to match exactly the string what you are given using this plugin, then after the job has completed, it will clearly show you here saying that the string whatever that you have given to analyze in the build is appearing. So that is how mainly you will be using it to match a particular pattern. So depending on what kind of task you are doing, you will be knowing if there is an expected error that you are going to find in it, then give the exact string matching in it, so that when you run the job and in the output, anywhere if you see such an output coming on the Jenkins will automatically match it, and if it matches, and it will be showing you here on the job page that this particular job when you ran, it was able to find the pattern that you have given. So that is how you can quickly analyze what are the expected failures that you are having in your job. Okay, so that is the plugin will be used. Okay, next, nested view plugin. What do you mean by nested view? View means, what is this? This is the view, correct? What do you mean by nested view? A view inside a view. For example, now I created one view and I have put one job inside it. Now let's take, you are going to create a job for a particular product. And for that product, you might have 10 production jobs and 10 testing jobs. And if you are interested to see only the test jobs, then what we can do is first we can create one parent view called that particular name of the product, and inside that I can create further two more views where one view will be used for showing only the test jobs and the other view for production jobs. So that is how you can create a view inside a view. So it is like creating a folder inside a folder. So first, when you create a view, if you come, you will be seeing two folder where it will be showing it as production jobs and test jobs. So based on your need, if you want to see only the production jobs, further if you click on that, it will be showing you only the jobs configured. So if you have such a scenario where you want to create a view inside a view to segregate it more meaningful, then you can create it using the nested view. Others, can you hear me? Okay, so that is nested view in case if you want to have a view inside a view setup. Okay, then the next thing is metrics authorization. Now, just now we saw that if you want to give an authorization on what a person should be able to do after he connects to Jenkins, we will be giving it in the security here. So if you go to security, manage Jenkins, global security, and in this we were trying to give, right, this particular place. So the difference here is now whatever that you set for a person here, it will be applied globally for all the jobs and all the nodes that you have. For example, if I say a person can modify a job or create a job, then he will have permission to modify all the jobs which is existing in the Jenkins. But instead of that, if you want to specifically give permission only for a particular job, not on all the jobs, because whatever that you're going to configure here will be acting as a global configuration for everything under Jenkins. So instead of that, if you want to give specification or authorization based on each job, then what you can do is we can try to create by installing this metrics authorization strategy plugin. If you go to a job, just exactly like this, for each job, you will be getting a metrics. Okay, so when you install that, here, along with the source code management, you will be getting a metrics based option. And in that, if you add a particular user and if you give a permission to him, only for this job, that person can access, but not the other jobs. So that is how using this metrics based strategy plugin, you can try to give permissions for a user for each job, not as a global one. So depending on how you want to give, if you want to give it, so majorly for all those people who are going to work as administrators, you will give it globally, where in that you will add all the user IDs of the people and you will give all the permissions, so that only for the administrators you will give it globally from the manage Jenkins page. Whereas in this, for each user, you will be choosing what permission to give based on the job on this. Getting it? The difference? So one thing is you can give the permission globally from the manage Jenkins, whereas particularly per job, you will be giving it for the all the other users, so that any users who now logs in other than the administrators, he will be having permission only to see. So based on a particular job, when he says that, can you please give me permission only for this job, then you will come to this job, and if you have installed this plugin, you will be able to get that particular option where you will say add the username of that particular person and give the permission only for this. Getting it? So that is what metrics authorization plugin. It is specifically for job. If not, using the manage Jenkins page in the global security, as the name says, it will be applied globally for all the jobs that you have in the Jenkins. The next one, build timeout plugin. So there is one plugin called build timeout. What is it used for? Now, when you're running a particular job, it keeps on running. So we don't know how long it is going to take to complete. So if you have a certain scenario where you do not want the job to run beyond some particular seconds or some time, then you can install this plugin. So if you install the plugin in your job configuration along with the build, you will be getting one more option where it will say enter the timeout. Timeout means if you give, let's say, 300 seconds, what is 300 seconds? It is going to be 5 minutes, right? So if the job is running and if it runs beyond 300 seconds, automatically Jenkins will stop it. So that is how it is always a practice to give a timeout for every job. Why? Now, if you're running some job and if you know that it is going to take maximum of 30 minutes, or because of some slowness, it could take more another 15 minutes, but it should not be taking anywhere between 1 or 2 hours. Because if it is running, then definitely there is some problem where Jenkins should have stuck in some place, correct? So that is how, if you set a timeout, if the Jenkins is going to take the number of seconds what you have given in the timeout, automatically Jenkins will stop the job execution at that time. Okay, so like that, you can make sure no job is hung for a longer time. So based on the time what you believe that it might take, give little more second beyond it and then allow it. So if you say the job can run for 30 minutes, maybe if you can give another 15 minutes as an extra, so you can give everything equally in number of seconds, so that whenever a job is going to run beyond that many number of seconds specified, Jenkins will automatically stop the job. Okay. Then concurrent build plugin. So this is one of the latest feature where now we are running a job, correct? So we are running a job one by one. That is, first you execute build one and then you execute build two. Suppose while one build is running, that is, if the job is running once, if you try to build now once again, by default, the job will be waiting to complete the first execution. After it completes the first execution, it will go ahead and run the second execution. But for some reason, if you want to execute more than one time parallelly, then you can make use of this plugin. So using this plugin, you can specify how many parallel runs of the job can happen. So that now, if you say the concurrent build is 2, then when you are already running this job, if there is another scenario where someone or the process it goes ahead and clicks it, then parallelly you will be able to run this 2 jobs. And if the third time, if someone is trying to run, it will not be running, because if you have specified 2 builds as concurrent, it can run maximum of 2 builds. So the third build will be waiting, and whenever any one of these 2 builds gets completed, the third one will start running along with it. So that is how you can run a job in parallel based on how many times you want to run. Okay, so that is when it's an advanced option that you will be using it. And then there is one more advanced plugin called build pipe plugin. Now, what exactly is build pipe plugin? So here, what will happen is, if you look at the Jenkins, it is actually giving us a default structure, correct? Where we always have to go through the same format, where first we will connect to the SCM tool, and based on the SCM tool, if you have anything to do, it will go ahead and do the build task, and then whatever you need, you will be doing it as part of the post build action. Now, at any point of time, if we want to customize the Jenkins, where I don't want Jenkins to be running in the same format, I want to run Jenkins in my own fashion, where first I want to run some task and then I want to do some post action. I don't want to connect to SCM at all. So that case you cannot do as of now. Or let's say I want to first do some build step and then connect to SCM for some reason. So those kind of customization can be done using this plugin, where this plugin is nothing but a collection of different kind of plugin, where using it you can define your own workflow or process depending on your company's requirement. Rather than following the Jenkins standard, you can create your own workflow on what you should be doing first and what you can do second. That kind of things can be done using this plugin. And in this, it will not give you any standard template. It will just give you a simple set of things where we have to define everything on what is the first step I have to do, what is the second step I have to do, and after this, what is that I have to do. So step by step, we will be giving everything. And in that, how you can give is, you can group everything and we can call it as a stage. So in the pipeline plugin, we will be calling a stage as nothing but a collection of a step. Now I can say for my first SCM staging. So stage means you can say what is that you are going to do. So you can create different kind of stages like SCM stage, build stage, and then post build stage, or continuous integration stage, delivery stage. So like that, you can combine several steps and you can create one stage. And for each stage, you can tell what and all are the steps it has to do one after the other or in the order, as well as you can also choose for each stage what machine you want to run. Because as of now, what is happening in Jenkins, if you run a job, all the tasks you are going to run will be executed on the same node, whatever it is going to pick up. But now, if you have a requirement where each step or each stage you want to run on different machines, then it is not possible. Whereas using this build pipeline plugin, you can specify a group of tasks put together as one stage, and for that you can tell use this machine and run. Same way, I have another group of tasks which I want to run on a different machines, you can specify. Like this, you can specify each staging, and inside that whatever step you want to run on different machines is possible. So how exactly you're going to do in terms of Jenkins is, it uses an advanced script called as Groovy script. So that is when, in order to use this plugin, you need to know a script called as Groovy script, which is specially designed for Jenkins. Okay, so you have to give a syntax of the Groovy script in such a way that Jenkins understands, and by giving it, Jenkins will exactly run the job based on how you have defined. So one of the simple example where I'm just trying to show you is the syntax of how you will be coding it, something like this. Now let's take, this is one of the Groovy script where everything will begin with the pipeline and end with the pipeline, which defines that you are trying to define a pipeline on what and all steps you want to work. So in that, first you can create something called as stages, and inside that you can create different stages, wherein you can give a name for that stage called stage 1, stage 2, or SCM stage, build stage, and testing stage, deployment stage. So like that you can give different stage, and for each stage you will create something called as steps, and in that you will tell exactly what you want to run. Wherein for each stage, you can have more than one steps also. But an example, what I'm saying is, I have created two stages wherein for each stage, I'm just giving a step and in that one simple command to run. So that now I'm saying first run this stage one, and for this stage, there is one step where you have to run this command. Same way, after completing it, go to the second stage, and for this stage, there is a step where you have to run this command and give me the output. So like this, you can create as many stages as you want, and for each stage, you can create as many steps as you want, and for each one of them, what exact command that you want to run, you can give it. Okay, so now for this, where is that you want to run? So that you can give it using a section called as agent, where in the agent, I will say use this label called test group, the same one what we have used for our testing, right? So that way now, whatever the stages or steps it is going to run, it will be picking up a machine which is available from this group. And whatever machine which is available, Jenkins will be using it and running each one of them. And suppose if I don't want to give it as common, what I can do is I can create an agent for each of the stage. If I give it inside it, then specifically when you are running the stage, it will be trying to pick up each node or the label, and it will be running that stages steps on that particular machine. So that is how you can customize whether to use one single machine to run all of them, or for each stage you can choose a particular machine and run. And not only that, we can use our own custom workspace, because now I know that if I use the machine, when Jenkins is running, it will always go to the remote root directory of that machine, and under that it will create a folder with the name of the job, and it will be doing everything, isn't it? But in this case, if I am having more than one machine, then you can create a common location for your workspace and specify that. So that is how, if you give it in the top level, then all the tasks that you are going to run, instead of using the default Jenkins workspace, that is the remote root directory, it will use this particular workspace, whatever that we are going to use. So that way you can also specify what directory you want to use instead of the default Jenkins directory. Okay, and we can also give the specifications on when you want to schedule by using a name called as triggers. So exactly here you will say cron and the 5 values that we want to give for the cron, that is minute, hour, day of the month of the year, and day of the week. So with respect to that, it will be automatically running all the steps based on the schedule time that you have given. Okay, now post step. So just like how we have post build action, suppose if you want to run everything and at the end you want to do something, then you can specify it here, where this is the condition. So just like how we gave the condition when I'm giving a post build action, you can specify here what is the condition. The condition always means whether the job is failing, that is all the steps is failing or passing, go ahead and run it. So that is how, what exactly you want to run, you can give. So the build pipeline plugin is a most advanced option where you can customize Jenkins completely based on how you want to do. So the complete syntax for the Groovy script on how to specify where to run everything, you can find it out in this particular location. Okay, so when you have time, try to go through and try to see how different kind of syntax will be given. Based on that, how Jenkins will be working. So let me just show you this quickly on how do you have to simply set up this. So if you're trying to set up a Jenkins job for build pipeline, if you go ahead and create a new job, in this, you can see that you have an option called pipeline. So here, if I use a job called as test pipeline, okay, and choose it, here you can see that the default options are all not there. Okay, that is the default options like SCM and then other options of post build, everything is gone. Only the bare minimum, whatever is needed, will be shown here. And it is not also having the options on where to run the job, correct? So those kind of things are not available. So now you just give those details what is shown here, but if not, you can customize everything by coming to the build pipeline or the pipeline section. So if you click this here, it is going to give you an option to specify the script, where if you give whatever the script that you have, then it is going to call this, and based on what you have given, it will be running it. So if I just save it, and now you can come back, you can see that it is trying to show us some outline, where if you click this, as of now I don't have anything, but it is going to show you what is the syntax on how it is going to run everything. Okay, so let me run it once and show you how it is going to see the output. Now first thing is, if you look at the output, based on how you have given, it is going to run exactly. Okay, so first it is saying that I'm starting the pipeline, and in that, what is that we have given? It will first use any machine which is available in the test group, and based on that, it is going to first execute the stage 1 and its first step, and then stage 2 this step, and after that at the end it will run this. Okay, fine. What is happening? Okay, it is saying that none of the nodes is available because I restarted the machine. So let us go ahead and create a machine and connect. Okay, so let us create this machine first. I deleted everything because of that. So let's go to configure and quickly let's create this remote root directory, and the label I will say test group. Okay, and here we will use Java Web Start, and I'll use this, and I've already downloaded the slave.jar. So here I'll go to the download folder, and from this, if you run, it is connected. Okay, and now if you refresh, you can see it is connected. And now if you come here, you can see that it has executed, where it has used a machine from the test group, and in that, if you look, it is not going to run anything under our what is that remote root directory, but it is going to create its own folder called this, and under that it is going to run. So if you can see this, it would have created this folder. Okay, wherein now it has not created with this name, but I had given to create this folder, so it is using this. So that is how whatever that configuration you give, based on that it is going to work. So here I said use this group and create this directory and use this, and in that it is trying to run all the stages one by one. So the first thing is it is running stage 1, for that the step, the second stage, for that whatever step, and finally whatever is the post build action, it is doing one by one. So like this, you can try to customize the Jenkins, and here it is going to give you the complete output on how it is running. What is the first stage? What is the second stage? How much of time it took, and what you have after this. So everything will be run by it. And now you can see in the Jenkins, I gave to run it every 1 minute, right? So automatically it is running every 1 minute. So that is how you can customize this particular Jenkins workflow itself based on how you want to run, what and all steps it has to do, what it has to do after that. It can be completely customizable. Getting it? So this, whatever the script syntax that you are seeing, is called as Groovy script syntax. And if you want to get the complete thing, you can go to this particular location, where it will give you the complete option for the syntax. So it will have the complete details about each and everything, how you have to use, so that if you can go through, you can do much more customization. But if not, pretty much if you want to stick to the standard workflow of Jenkins, you can use it. But when you say that you are a Jenkins developer, wherein you have customized many things, this is what it means, where on the advanced level, you should be knowing what are the different combinations or possibilities, where instead of using the standard Jenkins configuration, you can customize your own workflow. Based on that, Jenkins will be behaving on choosing separate machine for each task, giving different dependency on what first to do and what second to do, and you can specify a machine and a separate directory for each one of them. So that's how it's completely customizable. Getting it? On what is a pipeline? As the name says, pipeline means you can specify what you have to do first and what you have to do second. So as a process, you can define it. Okay. Got it? Any questions or doubts? Vinay, Nagesh, Hari. Okay. So far, what we saw is completely related to Jenkins. Okay. Now, since we are almost coming to the end of the first development activity, or as part of development, or as part of the DevOps, the first automation that we have to do is related to the development side. Okay. You can go to this page, the same page, whatever I showed you, right? If you can go here, you will have all the examples that is available. Each and everything that I've put here, you can find it there on how you can use a particular option. What is that you want to do for that? What is the syntax that is there? Everything will be available in that. Okay, you can go and refer to that. You will have plenty of examples because for every syntax, they would have given an example which you can take. Now, what is that I was saying? Yeah. So as part of DevOps, the first half, what we were looking so far is on the development side, what and all are the improvements on the automation that we can do. So that is how first we saw how is that we can handle the development requirements on storing the code and maintaining the code using a version controlling system like Git. And second thing, after it has been stored, how is that you are going to create a project or do the build of the project using Maven as a build management tool. And then we saw using Jenkins how you can create a setup, a continuous integration, continuous delivery, and create a process. And not only that, Jenkins can also be used to do various other activities. We will also be seeing little more things later also. But now it's more from the development improvement. We saw how we set the continuous integration and continuous delivery. Correct? But since we are completely now focusing on the development side of the automation, there are certain processes which we need to know. Okay, so let's spend some more time now to understand, in addition to this continuous integration, continuous delivery, or the processes what we have done, what are certain other best practices or the processes that we will be following in the software development lifecycle, so that when we get into the project, it will be useful for us to define and work on it. Okay, so that way when we are writing any kind of code, whether it could be a developer or even it could be us or it could be a QA engineer where they are writing any kind of code, which could be pretty much, it could be a actual project code or it could be a test code. Anything that we are going to say code. Code means it cannot be a program. It can also be a scripting. So that way, anything that we are actually trying to store into our SCM tool, one of the practice that we will be following is we have to get the code reviewed. Okay, so that is the standard and the practice every organization will be following. So as soon as we write a code, once we do a testing, then before we are going to do a commit, what we will do is we will try to send the changes of the code what we have written for review. Okay, so why is it we have to get the code reviewed? It is because now for some reasons, let's say if you're not doing a review, no one will be knowing what exactly changes you have done. So that way, if a person particularly, let's say he fixed some change and he immediately goes on a vacation or he's not available, and if there is a problem that is occurring exactly on his change, then no one else be knowing what exactly he did. So that is why one of the best practices that we will be doing is after a developer or anyone who is trying to do a change in a code, he will be sending it for review to his peers, where now as part of the review they have to go through all the changes or the lines of code which you have modified, and from that we will be knowing exactly what you have done. So that is how, in case if that person is not available, whoever did the review can actually help in this place in trying to fix the problem. It is not that he's mandatory to fix, but now until the other person has to come back, we don't have to keep waiting because we need to keep running things. So that is how we can assign the task to the person who has done the review, who where he can try to pick it up and do the changes. Okay, so that is one of the advantage. And the other advantage is when a person newly joins a team, he will not be knowing much thing about the project. So that is when whatever the code he has written, he will not be knowing whether he is following the standard or exactly he is going to give everything which is needed for the project. So by doing a code review, we can always help him to get on the track and guide him. This is what exactly we have to do. So it will be helping in that way also. And in addition, it is always better to have a second opinion or looking at the problem from a different perspective, because if I am writing a code, then I will always have some idea and based on that I will be writing. So I will not be looking beyond my concept. So that is how if someone else in the team looks at it, they might be able to think it in a different way, and in case if there is something that we are missing out, they can point out saying that, hey, you have done this changes, I think this might cause some other problem at this location, so try to fix this also along with it. So that way we'll be able to detect bugs in a better way by doing the review. Okay, and finally we will be having a proper engagement or a culture between the team, because we will be integrating and working together. One of the problem in team building when we say a project management is people don't talk to each other. Yeah, I just give you a task, you keep doing it and completing it, but only with we have lot of communication and coordination between different people within a team, it will be always better to work as a team and solve more problems. So that way when you do review, obviously you have to talk to others and you have to share the changes what you have done, and in case if they want to get in touch with you, they will tell you this is what you have done. So you will have lot of interactions between our peers and we will be always able to work as a team. Okay, so these are the main reasons why we follow a code review process. So now in order to do or follow this process, we will be having several kind of tools which is used specifically for you. Okay, now what exactly is that? So specifically, now every company have their own kind of tool using which you can do a review. So some of the common tools that we have in the market is called as review board or Gerrit or GitLab, where it has its own set of UI pages, or the tool will help you to specify how you have to do the code review. But one of the standard process what you will be following is, as soon as a developer or a user first in his workspace, if he does a change, then based on his change, what he has done on his workspace, he will try to use this review tool and generate some kind of ID. So that is how for every change you have done, you can generate a unique ID which will have the details about what changes you have done and on what workspace you have done and who has raised it. So you will have the complete details about the what changes what you have done, and in that you can specify to whom do you have to send the details. And the advantage of using the tool is, let's say you have a file and the file has 1,000 lines, and out of which you have modified only 2 lines. So if you want to give it for review, how is that you're going to give it for review? Because the file is available in your machine, and will you just give the complete file with 1,000 lines, attach it to your email? That will be a problem. So that is when you use these kind of review tools, it will be easily differentiate between what you have the content and what you have modified. Rather than sending the complete file, you can send a link to the tool, where in the tool, with respect to the ID that you have created for a review, it will show you what is the difference exactly has done, so that when you say that send this review to this person, for that ID, if whoever is the reviewer, if he goes to that tool and uses that ID and tries to see, he will be able to clearly see what changes you have done rather than seeing the complete content of the file. Okay, so that is how we will try to say these are the changes, and we will create an ID for it, and we will give it to a particular user, so that when the user tries to go through this, he will try to see what and all changes you have done, and in that he will tell, okay, at this line I see there might be a problem, try to change this, or there is a problem in this syntax, or this will not work. So whatever comment he wants to give, he will be updating it. So whenever he updates, we will be notified, or we can see in that same review tool that a user has given you these details, so that if he is giving you some comment, based on that you can go ahead and modify the code and test and send it back once again to him by updating the new changes what you have done. So like this, the review process keeps going until everyone is accepting. So that is what we call it as ship it. So now let's say if you are sending it for review and you are sending it for 2 people. So if both the people say all the changes are completely okay, then they will say it as ship it. Ship it means go ahead and do a commit of that change. So we will be doing a commit only if we get a ship it from any one of the user to whom we are sending it. So after you get a ship it for that review ID, you will be going ahead by doing a submit of the change after that, and then you will close that review ID. And if it is needed, when you're trying to do a commit, you have to give a comment, right? In the comment, you can give this particular review ID, where it will have all the details about who reviewed, what and all changes had been done. And not only that, for every review, you can also attach something called as bug, which will give the details about what is the reason for doing this change. So that also can be given. Okay, so if you look, this is one of the example of a tool called review board, where if you log into it, you can see the list of reviews that you have created, wherein for each review it will say who created it and what is the name that you have given. And inside this is an example of one review, where you can see you can give a name for it, and you can give the details on who is that exactly raising the request for review, and in that what is your workspace and to whom and all you want to send it. And if you want to give some description so that the user can understand, you can give everything. And finally, when the user, whoever receives it, yeah, Krishna, carry on. I'll be just done in another 2 minutes. Okay. So now if a user wants to see this, what he can do is he can click on this view diff, and that will exactly show him like this. What was the existing content? And on top of that, what is the change you have done? So from this, he can clearly differentiate, okay, here if you see earlier, the exit or this line was here, but you have modified here. So is it okay for you? So if you want to give any comment, if you click on this, you will get a comment box like this, in which you can write whatever comment saying that, hey, this syntax is wrong. Why don't you go ahead and fix it, because it might not be working. So like that, for each of line where you have changed, we can review and give a comment. Okay. And once the comment has been done, and when he comes back once again with the updated, then you can go ahead and click on the ship it. So when you feel that everything is okay, and if you click on ship it, that means we are saying I am completely fine from the review. So then the user or the developer will go ahead and submit the changes, and then he will come here and close that, or he will change the status of this to closed. So that is how for each change a developer does, we will be going through this review process so that we can keep a track of whether it has been properly reviewed and the review has been shipped it by different users. Okay. So remember, it is a mandatory process that everyone has to follow. And even we being the DevOps engineers, when we are writing script, when we store it inside our repository specifically for us, we will have to send the review to our peers and keep a track of it. So any kind of script that we are going to write, we will be using the same review process to work on that also. Okay. So getting it on what is the review process?